I'm Quinn Lewis, and today I'd like to teach you one of my favorite 3-ball patterns, Inline 3. So Inline 3, as crazy as it looks, is really just a simple shape distortion of a standard 3-ball box. This pattern is pretty popular among Japanese 3-ball jugglers, but hasn't yet gained too much popularity in North America or Europe. I only know of a handful of guys outside of Asia who are able to run it. I remember vividly when I first saw this pattern run by 3-ball legend Murakami from Japan. Check it out. Now that video really inspired me to get into 3-ball tech, and I hope this video might do the same for you. Alright, let's get started. Prerequisite tricks for this pattern are kind of hard to pin down since it's so different from anything else. You should already be feeling really good about your box patterns, standard box, loop shuffle, inverted box, and other speedy box type patterns. Another prerequisite for Inline 3 are pop-ups, where you stop the ball at the top of its path and pop it up almost like you're setting a volleyball. There are two more patterns that are really helpful for learning Inline 3, but they're not totally necessary. First is the pop-up, slammed, N-box, there's a bunch of names for it, this guy. And then the other is the time reverse of that. Now that you've worked up the prerequisites, let's actually break down Inline 3 so we can have a better picture of what's going on. So when you first learned just the standard 3-ball box, you probably did an exercise something like this, where you work on both sides separately trying to get a nice right angle. Now here's where the distortion comes into play. Instead of making a right angle with your 2-ball exercise, you want to make them in a straight line. So that's one side, and then the other side becomes the top. So putting those two pairs together for a 3-ball box, you get your nice right angles. The red ball will be our middle ball of the 3. The yellow ball will be the bottom, and the blue will be the top. Now let's get into some easy exercises to help you with the distortion. Now it's first important to recognize that this pattern has 3 separate throwing and catching locations. One high, one in the middle, and one down low. This first exercise will focus on the lower of the 3 catching sites, and it's simple as this. You want to give the ball a little bit of upward momentum, but then release it pretty quickly so the ball doesn't move very much, but your hand moves a lot. Now to make that exercise useful for the pattern, let's put our empty hand in the middle sight, our bottom hand in the bottom sight, and we're going to do the same lifting motion, but we're going to clap in the middle sight and then come back down to catch the ball. We can apply that same concept to the top ball, but instead of lifting slightly, we're actually going to push quickly, almost like setting a volleyball. And again, we can use the clapping hand to help us with this. Instead of clapping in the middle sight, let's get used to actually grabbing a beanbag that's already there. And the other 2 sites? Now the last 2-ball exercise is actually releasing the ball from the middle sight, grabbing it with the sight coming from either the top or the bottom sight, and continuing back down like this. in the other two sights. To make this exercise even more effective, you can reach with your empty hand to where the third ball would be. For example, if we're using the bottom two sights, moving your top hand to where that third ball would be. In the opposite, moving your hand down to where the third ball would be. Now that you've got the 2-ball building blocks, let's see if we can get the 3-ball version going. The way I started learning this pattern was just starting with a standard 3-ball box, throwing one high, doing a single cycle of inline 3, and back to box, like this. If you prefer to just start cold, simply throw one high, one cycle, and stop. Once you feel comfortable with a single cycle, see if you can get 2. And just like any pattern, keep building that up until you're comfortable running. And if you want to be extra fancy, you can start with a 3-ball stack. Lastly, I have a few tips that can really make your life a lot easier in learning this pattern. First is prop selection. Now, I prefer to use really squishy, saggy, dead drop kind of beanbags. These work great with inline 3 because they don't bounce out of your hand when you're doing those quick pops. The next tip is relating to your hand and arm position when you're running inline 3. Starting with your arms, I find it's most helpful to have your elbows slightly away from your torso. Your hand position, rather than catching palm up like you do with most other juggling, your hands are actually going to be somewhat sideways like you're holding a Coke bottle. Now the bottom and middle balls get a real true catch, not so much for the top ball. That's more of a push. And there's a hand position that's worked for me that I hope will work for you as well. That's something like this. My middle finger acts as the bottom of like a little cup, and the other 2 fingers are there to just support the ball from falling out of the cup. So rather than pushing palm up, you can push with that middle finger as the base and your thumb and index finger as the supports. If you follow these steps and practice diligently and frequently, you can expect to have a solid inline 3 anywhere between 3 and 6 months. And once you've got it down, you can impress your friends, family, and jugglers alike with a pattern that looks like magic. Thanks for watching, and happy juggling.